We will go ahead and get started. Today we are in Numbers chapter 18. Before we begin, let's open in prayer. Father, I pray that you would bless our time and study this morning. I pray that this would be fruitful for everyone gathered here. In Christ's name, amen. If we remember from the last couple of weeks, from chapters 16 and 17, there was rebellion in the camp. Certain men were called to perform their service to Yahweh, but they had refused to come. They were angry that Moses had taken them out of Egypt, a land that they said was flowing with milk and honey. They were angry they were brought into the wilderness. They were angry Moses was ruling over them, telling them what to do, and so they had refused to come. And they were rebelling against Moses, and ultimately they were rebelling against God. And as they approached the tabernacle. And they're in a place that they shouldn't be. And they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And they're burning incense to the Lord, which is a form of worship. And they're challenging Moses. And again, they're actually challenging God. And to prove that Yahweh had indeed picked Moses, he tells the people that if these men who are in rebellion die a natural sort of death, then Yahweh has not sent him. But if Yahweh creates an entirely new thing, he does something crazy, something impossible. If Yahweh does something like the ground opens up like a mouth and swallows everyone in the rebellion against God, then everyone would know that the people were indeed in rebellion against God. And then the people would know that Moses does indeed speak for God. And just as Moses finished speaking those words, the ground underneath the rebellion split open and swallowed them up, them and their household and all their possessions. And then the Lord commands that only the seed of Aaron may come and burn incense before him. And so the next day, the whole assembly of Israel is angry with Moses and with Aaron. And they approach again the tent of meeting to confront Moses and Aaron. It's like they didn't learn anything from the day before, right? And when they draw near, the glory of God appears in a cloud to wipe out this insurrection. God wants to kill them immediately. And a plague breaks out among the people, and they start dropping like flies. And Moses and Aaron have to intercede for the people so that they won't all die. And Aaron rushes into the midst of the assembly and burns incense and makes atonement for the people to avert God's anger and his wrath. But before he is able to do this, more than 14,000 people have already died. The plague was spreading fast. And then in chapter 17, after telling the people that only Aaron and his sons may draw near and serve him, God performs a public demonstration for the people that Aaron is his high priest, that Aaron is his choice. God instructs the head of each of the tribes of Israel to put forward a branch or a rod. And the rods are placed inside the tent of meeting. And Yahweh says, and it will come about that the rod of the man whom I choose will sprout. Thus I will rid myself of the grumblings of the sons of Israel. And the next day, Aaron's rod and none of the others had blossomed flowers and ripe almonds, confirming him as God's chosen. How else could a dead stick, not connected to the tree, not connected to the roots that give the nutrients that support life, produce new life and fruit, unless God himself had done it? And by the end of chapter 17, the people are terrified. They say that everyone who comes near this place, referring to the tabernacle, dies. And they ask, is God going to kill us too? And the answer to that question is found in the next two chapters, chapters 18 and 19, with the priesthood and their duties in chapter 18, and the purifying of Israel, chapter 19. And so, with that introduction, are there any questions, any comments, anything we want to add as an introduction before we get into chapter 18? Seeing none, let's get into chapter 18. Let's read verses 1 through 7. So Yahweh said to Aaron, you and your sons and your father's household with you shall bear the guilt in connection with the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you shall bear the guilt in connection with your priesthood. But bring near with you also your brothers, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may be joined with you and minister to you, while you and your sons with you are before the tent of the testimony. And they shall thus keep your responsibility and the responsibility of all the tent. But they shall not come near to the furnishings of the sanctuary and the altar, so that neither they nor you will die. And they shall be joined with you, can keep the responsibility of the tent of meeting, for all the service of the tent, but the outsider may not come near you. So you shall keep the responsibility of the sanctuary and the responsibility of the altar, so that there will no longer be wrath on the sons of Israel. And behold, I myself have taken your brothers the Levites from among the sons of Israel. They are a gift to you, given to Yahweh to perform the service of the tent of meeting. But you and your sons with you shall keep your priesthood in everything that concerns the altar and inside the veil, and you are to perform service. I am giving you the priesthood as a bestowed service, but the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. So right off, there's something somewhat unique that happens in this chapter. Does anyone see it? Does anyone know what it is?
Priests have certain rights.
Yes, but even before that, what's unique that God does here?
He speaks to Aaron.
Yes, God is speaking to Aaron, right? Usually he's speaking to Moses. Yeah. So God is speaking directly to Aaron as high priest and not to Moses as he usually does. And God only does this a handful of times. In Exodus, God tells Aaron to go into the wilderness to find Moses to be his mouthpiece before they go and confront Pharaoh, to let the people go so that they can worship Yahweh. But this occurs before Aaron was made as high priest. The only other time that God addresses Aaron directly and singularly is in his role as high priest and is in Leviticus, immediately after the death of his sons Nadab and Abihu, after God kills them for offering strange fire during the worship of God. So if you remember in that situation, they burned incense when they shouldn't have, offering worship to God that was foreign or forbidden, worship that God had not prescribed and that God didn't want. And so God consumed and killed them with fire. And then right after this happens, God addressed Aaron, instructing him and his sons that they must be holy and sober in their worship to him, and indicating that Nadab and Abihu hadn't been holy and sober. And the penalty for not worshiping God rightly for the priests would be what? It would be death. And so that's the only other time that God speaks directly to Aaron. Normally, God's instructions are mediated through Moses. Why? Why do we think he speaks to Aaron here and not Moses?
Maybe give the people some peace in the midst of their ignorance and let them know that Aaron does play a big role.
Yeah. He's been challenged. Yeah, so both times when God addresses Aaron personally, it's immediately following some sort of judgment that the priests, for the priests, for not following his commandments in worship. And each time, God has to reiterate that the holiness of the job that the priests do, that when that holiness is breached, God's judgment and his wrath is poured out. Maybe another reason that God speaks directly to Aaron is because the last couple of chapters, like you're saying, Aaron has been challenged by the people, right? 3 times the people have challenged Aaron. 3 times God has vindicated Aaron. 3 times God has said, Aaron is my guy. And now this is probably the highest validation, the highest form of vindication that Aaron can receive as high priest, is this personal divine revelation directly from God. God isn't speaking to anybody else in the camp. No one besides Moses can make this claim. No one besides Moses would dare make this claim. And then maybe lastly, as I was thinking through this, what do you think when your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss calls you into his office, the big boss, right? Be it for good or for bad, you're not quite sure. And it doesn't happen very often, but how are you feeling? What's been communicated to you before you ever step foot in the big boss's office? Right? It's a serious meeting, right? Something apparently my immediate supervisor couldn't tell me. And I imagine that's probably something how Aaron is feeling, that there's a serious message God is giving to him. There's this gravity to it. There's this weight to this moment. And there's probably no more important message Aaron is going to receive. That God is holding Aaron and his sons personally responsible for the holiness of the tabernacle, for the holiness of the dwelling place of God, the place of God's special presence among his people before the temple was later built. Yeah. So the first section deals with the duties and the responsibilities of the priests and the Levites as mediators between God and the people of Israel. God tells Aaron that the Levites have been given to the priests to assist them in their service of the tabernacle. They are a gift. And it's a kind of a play on words. The Levites are Levied to the priests. If we remember from Genesis 29, Jacob is married to both Leah and Rachel, right? Jacob loved Rachel more, and Leah can tell Jacob loved Leah more. Or, did I say that right? Leah, yeah. The text says that Leah was unloved, but Leah can have children and Rachel can't. But Leah has this hope that Jacob will come to love her as she can give him children. And after a time, Leah gives birth to Reuben and then Simeon, but still Jacob doesn't love her. And then Leah bore Levi, the third born. And she says, now, this time my husband will be joined to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, his name will be Levi. And she's thinking, finally, Jacob will love me. Finally, he will be with me as a husband should be. Finally, his heart will be joined to mine, and we will be together. And that's what Levi means, to be joined or attached. The Levites are Levied to the priests. They are given as a gift and joined to the priests. So the idea of God giving the gifts is one of the main themes that we see in this chapter. God gives and gifts the Levites to the priests. The people give tithes and offerings to the Levites. God gives the priesthood as a gift to the priests, and the priests are gifts to the people. That word, gifts, giving, some form, some combination of that is mentioned 16 times in this chapter alone. The Levites and the priests work in and around the tabernacle. The priests serve in the sanctuary. The sanctuary is what we would call the holy place. Inside the sanctuary were the furnishings, the golden lampstand, the table with the showbread, the altar with the incense. And separated from the rest of the tent by a veil was the Holy of Holies, which held the Ark of the Covenant. The priests could only come from Aaron and his sons. Only the priests could serve and minister inside the sanctuary, the inner tent area. They were the only ones who could approach and draw near to the sanctuary. The Levites would serve in the tabernacle, but they couldn't approach the sanctuary lest God kill them. They served outside the sanctuary, inside the courtyard area. Together, the priests and the Levites were responsible to serve and protect the tabernacle, to keep the people away from God's holiness. And just look at this picture. That could be a daunting task, right? The tabernacle is literally surrounded by the people. It's in the center of the camp. And like we saw in chapter 16, the tabernacle could easily be overrun if God had not personally intervened to prevent it. In the course of their duties, the priests and the Levites direct the worship and the sacrifices. They're handling and directing the sacrifices. They serve as a link between God and the people, because God at this stage in redemptive history, right, is not yet approachable. You can't approach God. The veil has not yet been torn. And so God has placed buffers to prevent any unauthorized access to him. Because if the wrong people went someplace they shouldn't, if they, in all of their sinfulness, got too close to the presence of God and his holiness, they would provoke God. And in his anger, many people would be killed, like the 14,000 in chapter 16. So, to prevent something like this from happening again, God makes it so that the priests and the Levites would bear the guilt if they let anyone near who shouldn't be near. They would pay with their lives because they are now being held responsible to protect the holiness of God's dwelling place. The priests, the Levites, they have this shared responsibility, but there's a distinction between the two, right? There's a distinction and a hierarchy in their roles. And the roles, their responsibilities have to be maintained. The Levites would assist and serve the priests. They would minister and guard the tent, all the while not approaching the entrance or the holy objects, while the priests would guard the interior of the tent and the altar. They would bear the burden for any violations, along with the violators themselves, instead of the whole camp. The priests and the Levites are looking to prevent any encroachments from outside the Levitical line, but they're also looking to prevent encroachments from inside of it, from rebellion, like Korah, from neglect, from impure worship, like Nadab and Abihu. And because they are now responsible and bear the penalty, the priests, the Levites, they act as kind of a lightning rod, taking upon themselves God's anger if anyone sins against the tabernacle. So the people as a whole would be spared. And like you were saying, that gives them peace. There's the fear is relieved, and that's why God is doing this. There was fear at the end of chapter 17, and so this is a mediation of that. So in this section, God gives warning after warning to Aaron, 4 warnings that anyone who does not heed these warnings that God is giving will die. The Levites, the priests, or the Israelites, the Levites and the priests. And so again, God is setting up these buffers to prevent his divine wrath from being poured out on the people of Israel. And his wrath, if it's poured out, will be poured out on the priests. The priests pay the penalty, not the people. And that sounds kind of familiar to us Christians, right? That there's this connection that points to Christ, that the priests bore the guilt of the people. That God's wrath was poured out on the priests instead of the people, and the priests took on God's punishment themselves instead of the people. And again, that sounds familiar in the same way that Christ bore the guilt of his people. God's wrath was poured out on Christ at the cross for all of God's people. Christ took the punishment himself that all of God's people should have taken. So in this way, Christ is the propitiation for his people, that the priests served that same function, meaning they satisfied God's anger and wrath for the sins of the people. The priest mediated between God and the people, and that points to Christ, our high priest, and his mediation for his people. So in a way, the priesthood is a very real gift of grace to the people of Israel, taking away their fears, alleviating them, and in a very real way, it points to Christ and his future work on the cross. So any questions, any observations, any comments, any thoughts on this first section?
Yeah, just in a couple of those illustrations that you had, it looked like the pillar of smoke was like directly above the Ark of the Covenant. Is that the Jewish tradition? Is that where the pillar of smoke and fire would be located? Wherever, as they were walking and traveling, it would be right above the Ark of the Covenant?
When the camp, I'll defer to Joseph, but when the camp was struck and they were moving, I believe the pillar led the way. When they made camp, I believe it was over the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I picked this particular image is literally because you know, I don't know how historically accurate this one is, but you get the picture of like, man, if the people truly wanted to, what's to prevent them from, besides God, what's to prevent them from just overrunning that temple or from the tabernacle? You know, how hard would that really be? Not hard. And we see as the people in chapter 16, as the people are angry and they're coming near, you know, they unless God in his anger stopped it, it wouldn't have been long before the 600,000 people that are the men of Israel would have overwhelmed the 22,000 men of Levi. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting how, by doing this, like, he establishes order as the church should have the order.
Yeah.
You know, Aaron will answer to God, and
Yeah.
then the Levites will answer to Aaron, and then in return, they'll support the priestly Levites.
Yeah, and you see that a lot with the tithes as well, where you have Israelite giving to the Levites, and then the Levites giving to the priests, and the priests giving to God, and so there's this order and structure of how they do things. Yeah.
It just shows like how us as a church have to just have that order as well nowadays, not just.
Yeah, God is not a God of chaos and confusion. Yeah. Yeah, very good. Any other comments or questions or observations? Excuse me? I imagine he's standing right next to Aaron. Honestly, I imagine as God is telling, so the rebellion has been quashed. God has affirmed his choice through the rod that has blossomed almonds, and Yahweh is addressing Aaron. I imagine Moses is standing right next to Aaron.
So I guess I'm speaking about the inheritance that is given to Aaron.
Mm.
What about Moses? Does he get? I don't remember.
I think he would fall in with the Levites, since I don't know that he's necessarily, and again, correct me where I'm wrong. Aaron and his sons are the priests, and so Moses is the leader that God has chosen and selected, and so he's going to be supported and provided for, just like the other priests and the Levites, based on what the people give to God for his service. It'll be different in the terms of what God has designated for Aaron and the sons, but I imagine what he's getting is what the Levites are getting. And so his income, the support that he has for his family is what all the rest of the Levites are getting from the rest of the people.
And he has spoken to Aaron before,
Yes.
so, I mean, he's seen it before, so.
There's been,
He's good that, he didn't put him back on his toes or on his.
yes, and there's been a handful of times where Aaron has been rebuked by God with a couple of other people. Aaron and Miriam were in a way challenging Moses, and God addresses all three together. So there's been a couple of times where Aaron is addressed by God, but where God addresses him singularly, where one-on-one kind of a way, that happens very, very infrequently, and so it's unique when it does happen. And so we look at that and say, why is that happening? And so we look at the uniqueness of that and try to draw some goodness out of that.
I just found it particular that he would tell Aaron that he would be his inheritance very directly to Aaron.
Yeah.
But he did not say that to Moses, and I'm wondering, is there a reason? Did I miss it somewhere? Am I forgetting?
The next section talks a little bit about that, I believe, or actually the section after that, where he talks about the inheritance that God will be his possession, God will be his inheritance, and I think it's ultimately pointing to, it's a picture of our inheritance in God. But yeah, I think it's, what he's talking about there is ultimately the priesthood. And ultimately, it's an inheritance that they get as a part and separate from the tribal inheritances of land that the rest of the tribes get. But Moses and all of God's people are going to inherit God as a part of that inheritance. So does that answer your question? Would anybody smarter than me add anything to that?
I'm not smarter than you, but it's beautiful, kind of the picture as Israel, these portions are divided up to each tribe, and Levi doesn't get a plot of land. And so God says to them, I'm your portion. And
Yeah.
the the psalmist picks that up later, the Lord is my portion, so like my slice of the pie in this life is the Lord.
Yeah.
That's pictured by the special access.
And that's
that
enough.
Levites have
Yeah.
to God. That's the inheritance of God's covenant people as a whole. It's a
Yep.
beautiful picture.
Yeah, it is. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's read verses 8 through 19. In this section, God speaks again to Aaron. And Yahweh spoke to Aaron, "Now behold, I myself have given you the responsibility of my contributions, even all the holy gifts of the sons of Israel. I have given them to you as a portion, and to your sons as a perpetual statute. This shall be yours from the most holy gifts, reserved from the fire, every offering of theirs, and every grain offering, and every sin offering, and every guilt offering, which they shall render to me, shall be most holy for you and for your sons. As the most holy gifts, you shall eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy to you. This also is yours, the contribution from their gift, even all the wave offerings of the sons of Israel. I have given them to you and to your sons and daughters with you as a perpetual statute. Every one of your household who is clean may eat it. All the best of the fresh oil, all the best of the fresh wine, of the grain, the first fruits of those which they give to Yahweh, I give them to you. The first ripe fruits of all that is in your land, which they bring to Yahweh, shall be yours. Every one of your household who is clean may eat it. Every devoted thing in Israel shall be yours. Every first issue of the womb of all the flesh, whether man or animal, which they bring near to Yahweh, shall be yours. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man you shall surely redeem, and the firstborn of unclean animals you shall redeem. Now as to the redemption price, from a month old you shall redeem them, by your valuation 5 shekels in silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, which is 20 gerahs. But the firstborn of an ox, the firstborn of a sheep, the firstborn of a goat, you shall not redeem. They are holy. You shall splash their blood on the altar, and you shall offer up their fat and smoke as an offering by fire, for a soothing aroma to Yahweh. And their meat shall be yours. It shall be yours like the breast of a wave offering, and like the right thigh. All the contributions of the holy gift which the sons of Israel raise up to Yahweh, I have given to you and your sons and your daughters with you as perpetual statute. It is an everlasting covenant of salt before Yahweh to you and your seed with you." So in return for serving God, God gives part of the people's tithes and offerings to the priests, to Aaron and his sons. It's not a handout, but instead the worker is to receive his wage. What they receive, they very much earn. And so God sets up this reciprocal relationship between the priests and the Levites and the people. They each depend on the other, and it's a cycle. The priests shield the people from the threat of God's wrath. They facilitate the worship of Yahweh. The people in return give their first and their best portions of what God has blessed them with to the priests and the Levites. And from those offerings, the priests receive their livelihood, and so they support each other. And you can't have one without the other. If the priests and the Levites go away, God would wipe out the people because of their sin. And the priests and the Levites exist to mediate between God and the people. The people's gifts are broken into 2 categories. You have the most holy gifts, and then you have the other gifts. So only the priests could eat of the most holy gifts. The grain, the meal offerings, the sin or the purification offerings, the guilt offerings, the families of the priests, the Levites, could not eat these. The holy gifts, from verses 11 through 19, those could be shared with the families. Everyone who was ceremonially clean could eat of those offerings, the wine, the oil, the grain offerings. The firstborn offerings of the animal sacrifices could be shared with the priests' families. As long as that person was clean, ceremonially clean, they weren't risking contaminating the priest. They weren't risking transmitting their impurity to the offering itself. So most of the sacrifices and the offerings, really only a portion of them were ever put on the altar and burned before God. A piece of it was burned and it was consumed. It would offer up a pleasing aroma to the Lord, but the rest of it would go to the priest, and it would be eaten by the priest in the tabernacle or in the courtyard of the tabernacle. The priest would cut out the fat of the animal, the fat cap. They would put the organs on the altar. They would empty out the blood against the altar, and they would burn it there. For the offerings that came from the ground, God's talking about the first fruits. The wine, the oil, the grain were to be the finest of the crop, the richest part of the crop. Literally, they were to be the fat of the crop, the fat of the grape, the fat of the wheat. And like the fat of the animal is considered the best part of the animal, and so it was given to the Lord. The fat of the crop, or the cream of the crop, was not to be eaten. It was to be devoted and given to the Lord. And that's where we get that term, the cream of the crop. The first ripe oils, the first ripe olives, then made into oils. The first ripe grapes, the first ripe grains that were then processed and made into oil and wine and flour were given to God, returned to God for his use. Later in Israel's history, Hosea illustrates Israel's unfaithfulness by using this imagery of first fruits, that the first fruits of the figs went to Baal instead of Yahweh. And this was an abomination. The first fruits were to be given and devoted to God. And God says everything given and devoted to him is thus given to the priests for their use. If it belongs to God, it belongs to the priests. The sanctuary alone may benefit from those items. And then in verse 15, Aaron says that any of the firstborn animals or the firstborn males must be redeemed because they belong to God. If you remember from Numbers 3, God tells Moses that instead of the firstborn males throughout all of Israel being devoted and serving God, he would have the tribe of Levi, wholly dedicated to serving him. There were about 22,000, there were 22,000 Levites there, and there were 22,273 firstborn males in the rest of the camp. God tells Moses that the extra 273 males had to be redeemed. They had to pay the 5 shekels apiece to redeem those firstborn males. That's about 6 months worth of wages per male, so that's not insignificant. And that money went to the sanctuary. It went to Aaron. The firstborn unclean animal may be redeemed. The animal could be given to the priests for their use, like if you had a donkey or something, the priest could use it. It could be redeemed, given an amount of money for whatever value that animal was worth. In Exodus, there's an example of redeeming a donkey with a lamb. And if you didn't redeem the donkey, then you had to break its neck. So there were some options there for unclean animals. But you couldn't sacrifice humans or unclean animals to God. That would not be pleasing to him. You can't sacrifice an unclean animal to God, because if you did, the priest would have to eat of it. And the priest can't eat of unclean animals. They would be ceremonially unclean. So instead, God establishes this redemption price for the firstborn animals and the firstborn males. And to redeem something carries this idea of ransoming it back from death with a price. You're buying something that is not yours. The firstborn child is God's, and so you're buying it back from God. The firstborn clean animal could not be redeemed. It had to be sacrificed. God calls the firstborn clean animals holy, which is to say they are God's, which is to say they must be sacrificed. If you tried to redeem a ceremonially clean animal from the priests, which is to say from the Lord, they would consider that stealing. The animal belongs to God. The priest would not have accepted that redemption fee for that animal. It had to be given to the Lord. It had to be sacrificed. And then in verse 19, God says that this everlasting covenant of salt it is an everlasting covenant of salt with Aaron. Salt doesn't burn on the fire. When you put the sacrifice with the salt on it, it doesn't burn. The salt remains. And so it's this symbol of the permanence of the covenant, that the durability of it, that God would preserve the covenant like salt preserves the meat. And as the people give their gifts to the Lord, they give their gifts to the priests, they would raise them up as an elevation or a heave offering to God, presenting them to the Lord for their use. Okay. Let's go to the next section. Any questions?
That's a lot of instructions.
I know. Why do you think there's so many instructions?
Rebellious?
Yeah, I think so that's literally a question I have at the end of all this. Why do you think there's so many strict regulations on all these.
So that they could be annoying, so that they could be obedience?
Obedience, yeah. I think that, obedience is very important to God. I think that human nature is such that if God says, bring me your best animal, you will bring a tithe to the Levites and to the priests. It's not a choice, it's an obligation. I think that over a period of time, especially after Aaron's son's not there, you're going to have people that are, man, do I really have to do this? Do I really have to give him my best? Does it have to be a clean? Can I give him the one with 3 legs? And, can I give him the spot? You're going to have that human nature creep in, and pretty soon you're profaning God by not giving him his due. You're stealing from God. And so God's out, laying it out and saying, this is what I require. I think that's a big part of it.
I think it might be because they've been rebelling against God all this time. All rebellion,
Yeah.
there's been all the disobedience. And God's wrath from them.
Yeah.
And now they have, okay, this is what you're gonna do. And there's no way to say, well, I didn't know. So
That's true too. I mean, you look at it every step of the way, and we look at it with our eyes, and it's like, man, how could these guys rebel so quickly after coming out of Egypt? The things that they saw, the things that they experienced. How could they grumble and complain? And I think we quickly forget that we would have been too. But yeah, I think that's part of the sin nature. I think part of it too is that it's the reason for the law, right? These guys don't have the grace. These guys don't have the changed hearts that would love God naturally and love their neighbor naturally. And so they have to be told what it is to love. And so so to love God means I have to give him my best. Oh, okay. Glad you told me, because I wouldn't have done that otherwise, right? And so whereas somebody that truly loves God, it's like, yes, this is going to hurt, but I'm going to give him my best, the best of my best. And I'm not even going to think about it. I'm just like, of course I would do that. Why wouldn't I do that? Because he deserves it, of course. And the other guy's thinking like, well, how can I get out of this? But that just shows you the natures of the two people, the converted and the unconverted, the one that needs the law, the one that doesn't need the law, right? And because that's why you have the law for the people that are unconverted, that can't function without it, whereas in the New Testament you don't see that strict rule keeping. What do you have? You just love God, love your neighbor, love. That's it, and then that's all you have to do. But they don't have that yet in this stage.
Yeah, goes back to Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Abel offered the choices of his, fruit of the ground, and Cain just offered a sacrifice, and that obviously was substandard.
Yeah. But it's a heart issue too.
Yeah.
AJ.
Yeah, when we look at them as a lot of rules, it's an expression of God's grace.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
building off what Nancy said, it's a gracious provision to keep them from being consumed. It's
Yeah.
the fence, and we can grumble about the fence, but it's actually for our good. I think
It's for their
it's a
benefit,
means
yeah.
by which they can actually live in the presence of God. And, we compare it to the cross and see the inferiority of it, but, the psalmist later is gonna say, like, I delight in your law, it's my
Yes.
meditation all the day long.
Yes.
He could look at this, the regenerated heart could look at this and
Yes.
see God's gracious and lavish provision of all of these
They're
stipulations.
they're not hard to keep. Yeah, they're not hard to keep. That's not a burden. They can. The regenerate heart can say it's the commandments of God are not hard to keep. And how can they say that? Because the heart because he's a new creation. That's very good. This next section we'll go through quickly. We're running out of time. I sin in this area of time management when it comes to Sunday school. Verse 20, then Yahweh said to Aaron, you shall have no inheritance in the land, nor own any portion among it. I am your portion, your inheritance among the sons of Israel. Now to the sons of Levi, behold, I have given all the tithe in Israel for an inheritance in return for the service which they perform, the service of the tent of meeting. The sons of Israel shall not come near the tent of meeting again, or they will bear sin and die. Only the Levites shall perform the service of the tent of meeting, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations, and among the sons of Israel they shall have no inheritance. For the tithe of the sons of Israel, which they raise up as a contribution, offering to Yahweh, I have given to the Levites for inheritance. Therefore I have said concerning them, they will have no inheritance among the sons of Israel. So the section starts with God telling Aaron that the priests, the Levites, would not receive an inheritance like the other tribes. And at first this might sound like, man, that's not fair. That doesn't sound right. Each of the other tribes would get this territorial piece of land that would be theirs as a tribe. And instead of that, God is saying that he will be their portion and their inheritance. But all the tithes that the people give will go to the priests and the Levites as an inheritance. The things that the people give go to them in return for their service in which they perform, for shouldering the risk and performing at the tent of meeting, which is again reiterated here, for transporting the tabernacle, for setting it up, for taking it down, for their work and laboring in the people's worship and assisting in the people's worship. And this was their service. A tithe literally means a tenth, and it refers to a percentage of the productivity of the labor that people would give to the Lord. And it's the best tenth, the first fruits. It's the best tenth of the produce. It's the best of your flocks, and this would go to the Lord. We see Abraham giving a tithe to Melchizedek of his spoils when he returned to battle in Genesis. We see Jacob offering God a tenth if he would keep him safe on his journey as he fled from his brother Esau. So tithes were customary gifts given from the lesser to the greater. In Leviticus, God declares that his people were to tithe of everything. Here, in Numbers, God says that those tithes are to go to the priests and the Levites. There's 600,000 men in Israel. There's 22,000 Levites. The 600,000 support the 22,000. And the idea is, we kind of touched on this earlier, that this is a gift. This is a reward. Aaron and Levi, the tribe of Levi, are receiving a higher or a better inheritance than the other tribes. Yahweh is their inheritance, not a piece of land. They get to work for God, not out in the fields. And this thing makes us think of the Christian's inheritance, where in 1 Peter it says that through the resurrection of Jesus, we believers in Christ have attained an incorruptible inheritance that is better than anything we could possibly imagine. I know we went through that quickly, but any questions on that?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
One of the things that, as I was reading this yesterday, what it made me think is like, it is so much more what they're doing
Yeah.
versus what anybody else is doing. Because I think of it, do I want God's provision for the rest of my life and his blessings, or do I want a piece of land?
Yeah.
You know, do I want to have that communion with God? I mean, that seems so much greater than any other inheritance.
Yeah.
That was just.
I made notes on it. It's, John in Revelation talks about, as he's trying to describe what heaven is, describe what this inheritance that we looks like. The idea is, what's the most important commodity that we have on this earth, right? What is it? It's gold. People fight and die for gold. And how does John describe it? The value of it in heaven. It's like, yeah, we use that for the walkways, to line the walkways. And what did they use for the walkways in his time? Dirt, maybe brick, maybe stone. And so what he's trying to do is describe for us in terms of that we can try to understand that. Imagine the best. It's better than that. You can't do it. And this is the inheritance that you have, and it's uncorruptible. The thief can't steal it. The moth can't destroy it. It's there for you, being kept, waiting for you. And God is your portion. God's with you now. God is sustaining you, providing for you, giving you what you need. He's loving you. He has saved you. He is saving you. He will continue to save you. and he walks with you and leads you every day of your life. And so that is better than having a plot of land, someplace. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Can't, naked I came from the earth, naked I go back. You can't take it with you.
Seems like the Levites are really living by faith because their faith is in the fact that to some degree that the people are gonna give them the way that God had instructed them to give. That's really what they're depending on. Is
Yeah.
the faithfulness of the people. So that it's really, obviously they're living by faith in God, but yeah, that
The-
people are gonna live up to their responsibilities.
Well, and we don't have time, we're running out of time, but I'll summarize the last chapter. And or the last section in the chapter. In that section, the tithe was compulsory. They didn't have an option. If the people didn't come and give their tithe, the Levites could come and take it from them. So they didn't have to rely on the generosity of the landowners, because we go back to that idea of generations from now. Somebody may get in their head, kind of like Pharaoh did. He loved Joseph, but 400 years later, man, he didn't think so highly of them, and he became a hard taskmaster. And so who's to say 400 years later, why am I giving my best again? Refresh my memory. And so you have this statute that, the people have in place to command them to give their best. Because again, they're working for it. They're earning it. It's not, oh, here's free money. Take it and just go put your feet up.
And what does God say in Malachi? You've robbed me. Well, how did we rob you?
Yeah. You gave me lame animals. You're like, what? That's exactly you. And again, it's like if the Levites are eating the piece of of what was given to them, of the people's tithe that was given to them, and they're eating the piece that they should have given to God, what are they doing? They're stealing from God. And in verse 32, God says that's profaning it, and even that is worthy of death. Yeah, so they have to give their piece, the Levites give their piece to the priests, and then once they give their first fruits to the priests, they can enjoy, their families can enjoy what they have without fear. But again, it goes through the Israelites, to the Levites, to the priests, to God. And it's the best of what they have, the best of what they have, the best of what they have, and God gets the best. And it's given to him, and it's a pleasing aroma on the altar. Yeah, again, great questions, great dialogue. Appreciate you guys and the interaction. That was great. We're over time. I'll close in prayer. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for the study. I pray it would be fruitful. In Christ's name, amen.